Hi everyone, it's Amanda Murphy and I'm here to tell you how I quilted the first block of my Meadow Minis design. So I began by quilting around the outer edge of the entire block, and I'm using that little notch on the BERNINA straight ruler right here to quilt around the edge. And basically I'm basting around the entire edge, about 1/8 of an inch from the raw edge of the fabric. So that area will be hidden in the binding if I finish it as a mini, or by the sashing if I finish it as a quilt-as-you-go project. Then I go in and I quilt around all the major elements of my design. So that would be around the outer flowers and the leaves, and this really secures the quilt top. I'm always making sure that the edge of my ruler is 1/4 inch away from the line that I would like to stitch, because it is 1/4 of an inch from the needle to the edge of my ruler foot. I'm going around here on a Longarm, but this principle remains the same on a sit-down machine. On a sit-down machine, you are moving the fabric and the ruler is one. Here, I'm quilting, after I've done all the outlining, piano keys in my border. So I'm using the ruler lines to keep my piano keys very uniform. And I'm stitching on top, you'll notice here, of my previous stitching lines to get where I need to go. So here I go quilting up, and then I'm traveling the edge. This area will be caught in the binding later, and then coming back down, using the lines on my ruler to keep my piano keys a consistent width. Okay, and here you can see me beginning a thread. So to begin a thread, you take the needle down and then the needle up, and when you pull on the top thread, that brings the bobbin thread to the surface. And I'm going to do a few stitches. I did them really close together here, and I'm lining up my ruler, and again, it's 1/4 of an inch from the seam that I want to stitch to the edge of the ruler, right? So I go straight around the center of the flower. Forgot to say that we're working on the center of the flowers now, because we've already done around all the outside edges of the flowers and the leaves, and we've done piano keys in our border. So now we're stitching the center part of the flower. And you can use really any straight line ruler to do this. And again, I'm always eyeing that 1/4 inch, always making sure that the area I want to stitch is 1/4 inch away from the edge of your ruler. It's a good thing they made it 1/4 inch, because if it was anything else, I could not eyeball it. But I can eyeball a 1/4 inch pretty well, and you probably can too. So here we go. We're almost around to our starting point. The next step is marking the center of the flower. And now I'm going to travel from one of the corners on the edge of this octagon-shaped flower center to the center of the flower. And again, I need to make sure that I will be stopping at an area that's 1/4 of an inch from the edge of my ruler. So when I stitch down, I should end up right in that center mark. Now I'm rotating the ruler, and I like to try to keep a pretty smooth line. It's just easier to make your points match if you keep a pretty smooth line. So instead of doing just one petal, coming back out again, and then traveling along the edge, I try to make an S-curve or a gradual curve when possible to get to my next point. So I'm going out to another corner, and then I'm going to come back in again. Okay, back to the center. And notice the edge of my ruler isn't sitting on the center that I'm trying to hit. It's 1/4 inch away from the point that I'm trying to hit. That's really important. So now I'm going back out to a corner, and I'm coming back to my center. Again, that edge of the ruler is 1/4 inch away from the point I want to hit. If you're having problems with your rulers slipping, you may want to try some tape. I have my rulers backed with Westerly stable tape. There are a few different tapes on the market. I just really like the Westerly tape, and I put it on all my rulers. It helps them really adhere to the fabric, particularly with domestic machines where you're moving the ruler and the fabric as one. Something like a Supreme slider or a free motion glider can also help make your machine bed slick on a domestic. That's really helpful for ruler quilting. So I'm finishing up here, finishing that last petal. Let's take a look. I've created a little blossom in the center of my flower. You can do this with a number of different curved rulers. Different curves will give you, of course, a different look. So now I'm going to end my thread. I've done a few stitches close together to end, and now I'm going to hold the thread to the side, do one more stitch, and then pull on that top thread in the loop, and that's how I bring my bobbin thread to the top. Okay, now I want to show you what it looks like when I use Westerly rulers. So I'm going to do the next block with Westerly rulers. So I'm going around just as I did with the BERNINA rulers. I don't have the little hook on the Westerly rulers, but I do have these nice perpendicular lines that I really like. And I think I'm stitching here with the 12-inch arc, and that is particularly a nice shape for domestic machines. It's easy to hold in your hands. So again, I'm eyeing that the edge of my ruler should be 1/4 of an inch from the line that I want to stitch on. And that's how I stitch in the ditch. And you might be surprised to know this is how we do it always on long arms. Even if you have an automated system, you usually stitch in the ditch with a ruler. Just because there might be inconsistencies in your piecing, and if you used a computerized system to stitch in the ditch, your lines might not be perfectly straight. So I use my automation all the time for other things, but I usually do ruler work for stitching in the ditch. So now I'd like to show you what I do for free motion in the background. You can really do any pattern you would like. I did some swirls here just because they're fun, they're easy, they add movement. And in general, when I have a line that's very geometric and hard in design, I like to juxtapose it with curves. So if I have a lot of curves in my fabric, sometimes I do straight line quilting, and the opposite is true as well. So I'm just doing some curves here to contrast with all these straight lines, some swirls. I do have a free tutorial download, a PDF download on my website for swirls if you are interested. So I'm just going around, and I really don't believe in ripping out quilting. I very, very, very seldom rip out my quilting, and it's not because I don't make mistakes, because I definitely do. It's just that I feel to get good at quilting, you have to be kind of forgiving, and you never have fun if you're always ripping things out. And you do get better and better. So if you've been trying to feather or something and been discouraged, just try some easier patterns that you feel more comfortable with, and gradually over time, your eye-hand coordination will improve and your overall quilting will improve, and you'll be able to do some of those more complex designs. So don't give up, you got to practice. It's just something you gradually get good at. Luckily here, there's so much going on, I don't think we could see much if I did make a mistake. And by the way, if you can't find your mistakes at the end of your quilting, they aren't worth ripping out. That's what I think. Okay, so let me show you what I do with Westerly rulers here. This is the 12-inch arc, and I'm using it to quilt piano keys. Now on this ruler, I don't have those little hooks at the ends that I do with the BERNINA ruler, but I love this ruler on its own because look at those perpendicular lines you can see. It makes it so easy to keep your ruler square, and this is also a really great shape and size, particularly for domestic machines. Now I'm stitching on the Q24 right now, and all my both BERNINA rulers, of course, but my Westerly rulers are 1/4 inch. I also do use them on my domestic with my BERNINA 72 foot, but it's much harder for me to film myself on my domestic just because I have to have another person hanging around. So here I can kind of film myself. Now, again, I'm stitching around the flowers, the flower centers. I'm essentially doing what I did with the BERNINA ruler. So I'm going all the way around, always making sure that my stitching line is 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of my ruler, because again, your needle is 1/4 inch away from the edge of your foot. So I've gone around the flower, and now I'm going to mark the flower center because I want to do that blossom shape. Now, because the curve on this ruler that I'm going to use here is a little different, my blossom shape might end up being a little different than with the foreign one I used out of the BERNINA set. Remember, you can use all different curves in your quilting, and no one is wrong or right. You get different effects with different curves, so that's why it helps to have a nice collection of curves in your rulers. So here I am, I'm going from one corner of that octagon to the center, and then notice I'm keeping that S curve going when I quilt to the next corner, and I'm showing you here that the corner is a 1/4 inch away from the edge of my ruler. And as I come down to this ruler, if I make a nice gentle S curve, when I come back up to that middle, it's much easier to hit the point than if I did like little, each petal on its own and tried to make them all hit in the middle. Don't make things hard for yourself if you don't have to, right? So I'm going to curve out here. I didn't do an S curve, but I did a gradual curve out to the next corner, and I'm going to come back in. I love creating blossom shapes and things like that in nice open spaces like this. And I love how these curves and the uniformity of these curves contrast with some of the free motion quilting and some of the straight line quilting that happens in other areas of this block. So back to the center, I'm almost done. I think I've actually switched to a 6-inch curve here now that I'm watching this again. And with the 6-inch curve, the curve is a little bit deeper, so it gives you a little different look than you would have with the 12-inch curve. I once asked Westerly about why one was called 6-inch and one was called 12 inches. They're both about 6 inches in width, both really good for domestic machines, and they said that it's because they're based on 6-inch and 12-inch circles. So there's a little fun fact. And let me show you how to end my thread. So I grab that top thread and I hold it to the side, and I do one more stitch, not 2 more stitches, that will lock your thread, just one more stitch. And then I pull on the loop and the top thread, and that pops my bobbin thread up to the top, and I can go ahead and clip the threads in at the surface as long as I have done a few tiny stitches right before to lock them in place.